Right.
Yeah, mister.
So that'll be a bit better, I think. I was like, there, why is that such bad quality?
It's because you never plugged the fucking mic in, Ciaran.
Action. Well, hello. You've joined us here for episode number 2 of the TalkCreate podcast. For the second episode, I've been graciously joined by the one, the only Gazmac, aka Gary, studio director, SWG3 here in Glasgow. And Gaz has been kind enough to sort out this big venue for us to have a wee chat about like all manner of topics surrounding like creative art, the creative industry, graffiti, street art. I want to know a lot about like the history of street art in Glasgow. Because, you know, we can be quite Glasgow-centric. This is where we're from and we should be proud of it. And I feel like only in the last, like, in my life anyway, in the last, like, maybe 5 or so years, have people of my generation started to become a wee bit, like, prouder of, like, being from Glasgow.
Yeah.
Because when we were growing up, and probably to a great extent when you were younger, like, Glasgow was seen to be this like really fucking edgy city, but actually bordering on like bad.
Off the back of that, people were really sort of pessimistic against any sort of local talent as well, and there was a lot of that. If it was local talent and it stayed local, that was fine.
Right.
As soon as you get out the scheme, you know, do you see he's doing that up there? Oh, is he? Is he? Aye.
That probably still exists. Like, is it like a? I always try to figure this out. Is it a West of Scotland thing? Is it a Scotland thing? Is it a quote unquote British thing that we like? If someone seemed to be doing something better, maybe we're a bit jealous. I don't know what.
I don't know, mate. I don't know. I mean, it goes way back as well. That even like some of the best comedians will say. Who was that? I'm going right back here, but Bob Monkhouse actually said the hardest place to play was Glasgow.
Really?
Because if they didn't like it, they would soon fucking tell you. You know,
exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of that. We're quite hard to please, but at the same time, why we turn and we're in is a weird one on me. I don't know where that comes from. You know.
One aspect of like the city that I thought was important, like particularly for this podcast, this particular episode, was because we're both from like the south side of Glasgow, and I would hope that this episode will be shared and viewed far and wide. And like whenever you talk
subtitles,
exactly. Whenever you talk to somebody for like the place you're from, you tend to go into like that, just Glaswegian slang, patois, and then like nobody will understand it. So I'm like quite aware, and also like because we're both from, I guess you would say like working class backgrounds.
Are you asking me to tone it down?
Well, you know what you call it? There's a term for it called code switching, and it's usually used in like African American communities. Code switching, it's like a term of like if again. I've heard it just being used in like the African American setting, where like someone will speak in a certain way at home, but then when they go to the business, they'll speak in a totally different way. And I think to a certain extent, working like in the arts, you probably have to do that a wee bit, or do you?
I don't think so in arts. I would say that's actual not myth. I think in business, just speaking Queen's English, innit? You know, it's that sort of thing.
But you'll have
communication.
You'll have to code switch in your day.
Of course, I need to tone it down. You know, you've obviously got to tone it down. Nobody wants to hear you sitting there. I know at meetings, you know. Nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah. Working class, like people within the arts, might be few and far between these days. I don't know.
Oh, aye. We do have a brilliant working class arts industry. You know, you've got people like Douglas Gordon and Jim Lambie for the contemporary side of arts come through the school and stuff, you know. I think it's getting harder to come by. It's getting harder for these guys to make a success of themselves because you get so many sort of whiz kids on social and things like that now. It's not so much, maybe I'm delving deep here, but it's maybe not so much the talent but how good you are online and things like that as well. Everything rolled onto one,
I
know?
guess you need to be
you know?
now. See, like, so getting into like graffiti, when you started, I believe it was around about 1984 that you started getting into what was street art. Wasn't even a term back then, it would have just been graffiti, graph, something like that. You started off, you and your friends came up with the crew Glasgow City Breakers, and you started off just as a breakdancer, or were you taking all the elements in?
You took all the elements. I mean, we all thought we were wee Glasgow rappers at one point as well, I think, you know. I remember us doing a jam, and it was like the first jam there was in Glasgow ever. We took all the subway signs out in the subway cars and done all our own pieces on them and switched them round and put them in the other way. And we still only ended up with like 35 people at the jam, but but we were there.
Back then, that was
we had a
great
night. It was between Penalty, Govan and Postal Park, all at Woodside Halls, and it was great. And there was boys up rapping on the stage, and what they were rapping I couldn't even remember, but it was probably copies of Wild Style and stuff like that, and there was b-boys going on, and this was very, very early on, you know. You're talking, it seemed like it was 10 years in the happening or something, but you know that when you're young, it was only probably a summer, you know, that this was going on, and it was really good.
So what else was like, what was the overriding culture in the city back then, and were you guys seen as being like alien, like when you walked around in the way you were dressed and the way you carried yourself?
I wrote about this. A good few years back, I wrote about this to somebody that's in the States and try to explain to them. But you're walking down Union Street, and there was Virgin Record Store, and standing outside Virgin Record Store was guys with Mohicans, right? Early 80s, punks, skinheads. There's people walking up and down the road in big groups, mods and stuff like that. You know, all them were kicking about. Hey, these wee guys come round the corner wearing skip hats sideways and Adidas tracksuits and the Puma tracksuits and stuff like that. What do you use? You mean what, man? What state of your hair?
See it coming from like working class backgrounds as young men that you were, was hip hop basically, because it had come from similar backgrounds in the States, it was like lower working 100%, class, it was 100%. You know, that quote unquote projects, the ghetto, etc, etc. That was, I often think about that about myself, like getting into graffiti. I was always creative, but graffiti was the only way that I could also be masculine and be creative at the same time, and have bravado, because art is seen as something it's a sensitive. You have to have sensitivity, but if
it's always been seen more of the middle classes and things like that with art, as far as your working class, you know, family and shipbuilding and stuff like that. And it's like, what's he doing? I was fortunate. My mum was a dance teacher. And that breakdancing thing really fitted well with that. It was like, oh, he's into dancing, you know, and I probably did have that ability there and things like that. But the rest of the boys I can't speak for, you know. We're talking like some Mark Smith, DJ, Brian, Archie, Cuban Brothers, and everything, you know. All these guys, we were all pretty much the exact same set, but we grabbed onto that working class thing of New York ghetto. We never realised it at the time, but Penalty, growing up in Penalty and things like that, it was a bloody ghetto. It was bad. The smack the smack in the 80s and things like that had really been tough on the whole neighbourhood, house breakings, cars, you name it.
Because Pennylee's close enough to like Govan and the areas that
Yeah.
it would have been affected by, with shipyards closing and things like that.
Totally, mate. You know, the whole place was devastated. You know, Thatcher in the 80s, you know, the rise of the Tories, you know, the rise of the yuppie,
Yeah.
you know, all that. And, you know, I remember my first job was they were trying to throw me into a freezer shop to work for, was it £15 a week? You know, so Masties, I remember my ma telling me off because she caught me dog in work. Because I was like, I'm not going to work with him for £15 a week. He's slaving me in the back of a shop lifting big boxes and all that, you know.
Right.
So we were all just buggering off, and just you had to do that to make your brew money and stuff.
Right.
And I think that was that alternative that was just something exciting to get into. But once you dipped your toe in it, you know, there was rapping, there was dancing, there was graffiti, there was this, there was that, you know. There was this whole institute and hundreds of other boys the same as you were all getting into it, and there was all these videos coming out and all that, and there was like just this whole new world, you know, that you could escape for all that nonsense, that you weren't even interested in anyway, you know.
Yeah. And so to further solidify your working class credentials in this city, you got a job as a bus driver in Glasgow.
When Billy was born.
1990 was it?
Yeah.
The year of culture.
Yeah, had to get a proper job.
So
You know?
how was it as a creative person who had all this, I'm assuming, ambition and skill, and you're living in Glasgow, which is like 1990 city of culture, and there's supposed to be these promises made to you in the city that you live in, and basically you have to, because you're building a family, you have to put all that in the back burner and get a quote unquote real job, and especially something like a bus driver, which is like certainly one of the most working class job titles I can think of. How did they rub up against each other?
I've had constantly, and every day wee things like no wearing the proper uniform and stuff like that. You know, want to make that look a wee bit cooler at that age and everything. I was 21. When I was 21, I looked about 16. People come in and take a second look at me and go, "You drive my bus?" You know, there was a bit of that going on.
What routes did you drive?
Oh, them all. Them all. You even used to... Oh, the buses was hilarious. The things you learned in there, it was all the wrong things you learned, you know, after all these drivers, absolute characters.
Yep.
Used to go into the bothy. And the bothy, you could scrape the nicotine off it was and stuff like that. I can still really vividly remember that really well. And all the lockers and stuff, you know, and you open the lockers up and there's Samantha Fox and all that, all still pinned on the lockers and all that stuff, you know. It was very much that working man's place, you know. But
did you manage to navigate you obviously managed to navigate your way around that quite well, but did you, obviously your co-workers must have seen that there was something in you that was like not just your typical loves the football and
there was a sort of memo come out. It wasn't an email or anything like that. Nobody did email, you know, there was none of that. There was a sort of thing came out about through the union office. It was that Des Divers in the union back then. I can't remember some of the names and things like that, but they couldn't understand how all the buses were getting graffitied inside the drivers' cabs. Oh, I was sitting there at the terminus like that. Oh, here we go on the roof of the bus, on the steering wheel. Ticket rolls. Oh my God, some of my best designs were on ticket rolls.
Right,
you know,
there you go. You just used what you had in front of you. And
funny that the ticket roll. I was sitting in East Kilbride, up at Calderwood in East Kilbride at my terminus, and I forget this guy came on, and this was a cycle I was on that week, and this guy's got us, and he seen the ticket roll sitting on top of my machine, and I had a drawing on it, and he's went, "Oh, can I see that?" Yeah. And you go, and he's went, "Oh, that's brilliant. Can I show my son that? That's brilliant. Can I take that? Show my son." I can't remember this guy. Turned out he was a lawyer, and he ended up, I done his son's bedroom up, half the back of that. The next day, he came right on, "I was hoping you'd be here again," and things like that. "Would you come and do some of that for my son?" No problem. Because I'd sort of had a wee discussion with him at that time. But then he introduced me and gave me a number for somebody at Cardano College. And it wasn't until a couple of years later I went, "Do you know what? you know, who holds onto telephone numbers like that now without a mobile or anything? I never had mobiles, you know, but and I ended up making a wee phone call to somebody and went in with this cardboard cutout, 2 bits of string portfolio at Cardona College, and that's how I got into graphic design.
Yep.
That's when the shares were in the buses, and it gave young guys like myself that had shares, I never knew what shares were. My dad says, get them. they'll be good.
Right.
You know, and when the biggest buyout came, I took myself back to school. I stuck a taxi on the road. I stuck 2 guys in the taxi and I took myself to college.
What do you mean? Explain that.
The
taxi?
A private hire. So I bought a car, got a radio fitted,
Right.
ep2 or a 50s, 50-50.
Right.
ep3 or a 3s and that, the guys. And I got a taxi badge on the car, and I got 2 drivers that wanted to use the taxi, and they paid me to use my taxi,
Wow.
and I took myself to college.
Wow.
I'd done the taxiing a few times, but I hated it. I hated driving and stuff like that. I
So
still hate
that was
driving.
like a proto Uber, just on your own, just like you are.
Just going out and getting your private hire. And
Interesting,
private hire back
interesting.
then was a busier job.
Right.
It was a good job.
I
Friday
bet.
and Saturday nights you were pulling in. You know, you could bill, back then you could bill in 300 quid on a Saturday night, sort of thing, a Friday, Saturday night.
I bet.
And they boys lapped that up.
Right.
You know.
So what did like the graffiti scene look like during all that time? Like, who were your peers at that point in time, even before you had the job as a bus driver, and during and after? Was everything evolving around you? Were you a major part of it? Were you just kind of sitting in the background watching it evolve? Was it a big scene back then?
I think, see, before the internet, it was a patchy scene.
Mm-hmm.
And you were either into it or you weren't. And anybody that was into it, you would source that to the point, right, Mum, I'm away, where are you going? Wolverhampton. What are you going down there for? I'm going down to see this guy Goldie. I'm going down to, he paints down there. Do you know whereabouts? No, some estate, right? That sort of thing. You would, for some reason or another, you would actually find out. How I found out all these things, you'd down to see people like Maud, Chrome Angels and all that in London, knowing that they were painting in Covent Garden, and coinciding that train journey to get down there and then get back for the Monday job and things like that was, you just took it in your stride, because there wasn't another way of doing it. There wasn't a faster way of doing it. There wasn't as if you were going to send an email and get a return reply. I will be there today if you make your plans then. You know, you can book a hotel easy. You can, you know, you went to the train station and bought your ticket.
Yeah.
It was as simple as that, you know.
So somebody like Goldie at that point in time was like making waves, and he was like a known person.
All these guys, mate, 3D, you know, Massive Attack. Look what they've all turned into. Goldie, Timeless, you know. It's mental. I know. Aye.
That brings me to my next question, guys. Who is Banksy?
Oh, I tell you, I'd have to kill you.
I wonder, like,
I've had this discussion with the Bristol boys.
right, I wonder how that
And I
evolves.
I promised never to repeat that conversation with a couple of them that I was speaking to.
Because they all know who Banksy is, but I'm sure it's quite underwhelming. He's just a guy.
Just a guy, man. You know, he's clever. He's a clever guy. Brilliant. Good for him, man. You know, he's done really well for himself and all. And, you know, he's been plagiarised to hell and everything. You know, and he probably finds that quite bemusing. And then he's there in LA and he's, you know, he's rubbing shoulders with all these people that think they're giants when they probably don't even know there's a giant of a
They don't know him.
there's a giant of a person standing right next to them.
See, you don't need to speak in such fond terms of Banksy, because he's probably not watching this.
No.
Do you think he actually goes out and does the interventions himself these days?
I think he's got a very good team behind him. You know, I think.
Because the one with the London Underground was really funny.
I
The other day
mean,
that came out.
You think he went and put, you know, you think he built up phone box himself?
No,
And he's
I know,
a
of course,
master welder. And,
No, I
you
know, I get you, I
it's
get
all
you.
that sort of stuff, innit?
Yeah.
But it's his ideas, innit? And it's his ideas that count.
The role that he occupies within, like, pop culture, graffiti art, street art, more broadly actually pop culture, because I think first and foremost nowadays Banksy is a pop culture icon as opposed to a graffiti artist or even an artist, I would say, because I feel as if, like, you know, your nana knows who Banksy is, and she might not necessarily...
It's weird that, innit?
She might not necessarily know that he's like... She knows he's an artist, but first and foremost people probably think of him as just a a mystery man or an icon. He's involved in music and things like that. I mean, Stormzy, when he was wearing the bulletproof vest and all that kind of helped bring him up again into Next Generation. Where is that line then, and how do we walk that line between keeping our credibility and what got us here, which is basically an illegal form of art or illegal form of protest art, if you want to call it that, but at the same time, on the other side of that line is the ability to kind of make a living and like not starve to death, basically.
He's made a lot of money at that, you know.
Yeah. But how do we walk that line?
I don't know, mate, because it's kind of what you go back to in the critical peers in this city as well. If you go back to what we were talking about there, you're almost, I feel as in this city you're a wee bit fear to that. You know, you it's uncharted waters for a lot of us, and you're a wee bit apprehensive to make the sort of steps and bum about yourself and stuff. Whereas he's obviously had this spotlight really right on him. He's deliberately went to grab that attention, you know, whereas I know people in this city that are trying to grab attention right now. You know, there's so many trying to grab that attention, but they don't seem to be able to make that leap into that. What is that? What's holding them back? You know, so there's kind of an unanswered question there. What you've gave me, that how do you cross there? How do you actually make that step? But at the same time, do you want to make that step? Because you might get criticised for it. Are you willing to give that whole working class thing up, or whatever, that whole history you've got, to make these steps and, you know, become this popular, you know, big time artist that's touring galleries all over the world and things like that? I would love it. Personally, I would love it. I think it'd be brilliant. You know, it'd be a great lifestyle. You know, we've got one or two artists in here that actually do that, and it is an amazing lifestyle to have. I
think sometimes it boils down to how honest you are with yourself, maybe, about like, and also the people that you work for or with. I mean, if you want to just purely do street art graffiti, then you do it. But if you are someone like me and you, who I don't have any qualms with working for a international, multinational company. I don't think, because I never really claimed I was anything other than just a commercial artist or a sign writer or something like that. Yeah. But if you're someone like yourself who's more, basically you running Yardworks is like a international graffiti / street art festival. You kind of have to be seen as being authentic to that, but also authentic to the idea that you're having to deal with like some group of people that are like perhaps not truly functional in society, and then you're also dealing with the other end of that, where you're dealing with like names like Martha Cooper, and you're dealing with like Pichavo, and you're dealing with these people who are internationally renowned artists, and you're having to, again, maybe it goes back to that code switching idea, so you're having to like talk to someone who's from Penny Lee, and you have to show them that you're authentic and they can trust you, but yet at the same time you're probably on a phone call 2 minutes later to like the booking agent of some famous artist or something like that. So there's like a line that has to always be walked there.
There is.
You do get stick for it, and I know that because I live in the same city as you, so like people maybe think that you are too one or the other way, but maybe coming like, because with age you kind of, and because you're kind of running an organisation here, you can't be pure ghetto.
No, you can't be pure ghetto. And at the end of the day, I'm making a living, but I've chose to make a living through something that I love doing. And what you're saying, that authentication part of that, I think it was Big Snub that turned round to somebody else, and that got passed back to me. That that's Snub23 Brighton.
Shout outs to Seth.
Yeah. He turned around and says, he's running a graffiti festival, but there's so many people running graffiti festivals and this and that, or street art things, that don't get it. They don't get what's required of the artist to actually, what it takes, that blood, sweat and tears to actually make that on the wall. And the fact that I paint it black, and he turns round. I think he turns round to that person and says, "It's because he gets it," you know.
Right.
And there's that camaraderie there that I have been through that. I have done the commercial work. You know, whether call it luck, whatever, that, you know, me and Andrew Fleming Brown Mutley met in this big empty place at one time, and I seen the potential in that to actually develop and bring these people in. You know, the very first thing that we done in SWG3 was a graffiti event, you know, so it's kind of coming for that roots and keeping their roots,
Yeah.
you know.
So, like, back in the day, I don't know what age I was or what age you were or what year it was, but I do remember coming in here at one point with Richie Strang, and he introduced me to this space, and it was absolutely nothing like what it looks like right now.
No.
Even the fact that the galvanisers yard is now part of SWG3 was completely non-existent, and like the constant noise of the galvanisers yard next door, basically it was just a conglomeration of like hand-built studios, and wee rooms that were occupied by just strange people. You had the guy downstairs that was
people called
fixing
Sheddy Boy and things like that, you know, because it was so cold in his studio because there was no windows, you remember, there was no windows in the place, so he built a garden shed in his studio.
Right. A studio within a studio.
Yeah, called Sheddy Boy.
Right. But SWG3 is like the jump off for Yardworks. I seen Yardworks coming before it was birthed because I've known you for a long time, but for everyone else, or for a lot of people that know what Yardworks is now, it seems like it came out of nowhere. Where did it birth from? Obviously, you've had this idea in your mind for a long time, and you've had the venue for a while, and it just was a matter of time before these two things came together. But in between these two things was probably a fuckload of work, and going back to what you're talking about, networking or something, like, you have to be trusted. Like, I've been contacted a few times by random people to come, sometimes to a different country, to come and paint at a festival. And certainly we talked about this in the first podcast with Sam, is like, you have to at least come across as a trustworthy individual. So how did you even start firing off emails to these people who, even in 2017, when in the first year, there was still an international, it wasn't all just UK and Scotland people, there was international. So how did you even begin to fire these emails off, and how did that?
I think it was, your main focus was in local first, and that realisation that you can get that local source. You know, it's a strong enough scene there. There's a need, there was a need to actually put something back in there into the graph scene. No street art, no anything, the graph scene. Whether the boys are in boards or where their own was, that's besides the point, you know. Next, you start the networking thing. Going down to Upfest, going down to these places in London and things like that, you know. Already built up a relationship with ID crews and stuff like that, but down in London with Tizer and all these guys, you know, down in Bristol with Big Ink and etc. You know, even had the contacts with Monster Colours, kept them, just kept them. It's good to, you know, when you do that network and make it last, you know.
Monster Colours, that obviously Glasgow based or originated spray paint company, they had sponsored writers from Spain and places like that. Is that what you mean?
Was kind of, we kind of had this thing, the Monster family, you know, and you know, if the boys were doing a good enough thing, they're gonna give us a good enough shout and there was a good spotlight on it, we would give some paint and that, you know. But you know, with spray paint the margins are tiny fraction, you know, what you can make in paint, so it was very loose. But we did support the scene, we did really supply Glasgow, didn't we, for I don't know how long, you know. Darryl Riley, you know, he was legendary with that whole
shout
thing.
outs to Darrow and shout outs to Monster, because that was like where me and my friends got our first kind of inclination, or first kind of like little door opening to look at graffiti. Back in the days when it was the flip basement. Through Monster, through Richie.
My bozzer.
So then, so you fired off these emails to these people that are all over the fucking planet, basically. And funding, how were you paying for this? Loosely speaking, were you getting help from councils
for Yardworks, you
from
mean?
Yardworks, for instance?
No, the council have never been a help
No,
to graffiti in this city.
no,
No, never been a help. 100 smell like.
right.
You know, don't get me wrong, I did work for the council actually for about 9 years, 8-9 years, as a specialist art worker.
Right.
And I worked with a lot of young adults in care and
When you were doing your workshops?
yeah, when I was doing my workshops, youth clubs. I think I done most housing schemes, youth clubs, when youth clubs were a thing, around the neighbourhood. And then somebody came up with a bright idea that what they were doing in New York on Manhattan Island with the zero tolerance thing, it was New York city centre, you know, Manhattan city centre, that they did zero tolerance, and it did clean up Central Park and things like that, but they had this figment of their imagination that there was no more graffiti in New York again.
I remember
in the
it in
90s
Glasgow.
at one point, and they says, right, we're taking the same attitude as New York, but little did they know, you know, this graffiti was too big to stop them, but over there, you know, they might have cleaned up some streets in New York for the tourism because they had that much money to do that, but
There was shortly after the time.
they've never really done anything for graffiti, you know, the mural trail.
I did. One of the things that people were most interested in when they listened to the first podcast with Sam was that he is not a fan of the mural trail and the fact that the paintings last so long and they're not swapped out. I believe I'm not misquoting him when I say that. I believe that was the crux of his argument. It's not that he dislikes the idea behind it per se, it's the fact that he thinks that some of the murals should be swapped out. And I think he's probably got a point there, but to challenge that point, I'd say you probably don't need to swap a lot of them out as long as you're opening up new spaces constantly.
Yeah.
So,
But then how often can you just keep opening up spaces, and does, you know, that you know yourself, there's people actively hating the mural trail because of the art on the walls, and they think that's dysfunctional to our Glasgow buildings and things like that as well. So there's an argument against it, but there's a big argument for it, and then there's an argument for it again. There seems to be three different, what's the word I'm looking for, three different opinions here that for it. My opinion being that what you're talking about, what you're getting at, is to make that a rotational system. And I gave DRS that information quite a while back.
Who's DRS?
Yeah, that's Development Regeneration Strategy Glasgow. And I'd actually said that about making rotational walls, and you know, you've got things like in Partick, you've got, okay, it was for the Commonwealth Games and you had rugby and hockey and things like that, but then what's that got to do with Partick? You know?
And a lot of people, when they, any criticism that I've heard of the mural trail is mostly directed to the particular paintings, which I believe is quite a shame for the artist that painted them, because his skill levels, the gentleman whose name I can't remember, he's a really skilled painter, but when it happened, when it came to him painting them, he was up against it basically, and he didn't get his best work. But if tomorrow you were given the keys to the city and told that the mural trail, Gaz, is yours, how would the mural trail look then in the next 2 to 5 years?
It'd be completely diverse. You would turn to fine art, contemporary art, street art, graffiti art, you know. To give you an instance, so I kind of got a bit of a lead on the new development of Glasgow University. So the new library was done by Chelsea Frew. I had Barry Jenkins in doing a corridor. I had Sigel painting our corridor. So they were all painting, but there was completely three different styles of painting just within one wee vicinity there. It wasn't as if I got the job, I'm going in there and I'm going to do everything myself. You know, there's so many different kettles of fish so to speak,
But-
in
but
the
that's-
university, right? So that's just the uni. But then there's a new winter garden getting built, and we've got an artist coming in there, and it's going to be a graffiti artist. He's coming in and doing that, and I put in so many different people's work there, and the university chose the graffiti artist, which is quite unusual.
Right.
So it shows you the opinions in the city are they all steered towards what we do have is a majority photorealism in the city, which I love. I think it's amazing. It's an amazing ability to be able to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and it is top of the game getting there. But there's so many different styles of art out
So when you
there,
say
and graphic
diversity,
design
you
and
mean-
sign
yeah.
writing, you name it. There's so many different things that this city's got amazing talent in. How are we not celebrating them? How do you know? Let's get them. And who was this guy that got to do all them that we can't remember his name?
Yeah.
That's some legacy that they've
I know,
left.
I know, it's unfortunate.
Nobody knows his name.
Yeah,
You know.
it's the Archways project that just recently got completed that me and Conjo had the kind of honour of being part of.
It's an amazing opportunity for young, up-and-coming graffiti street artists to get themselves seen.
It was defaced during the painting of it, but it used to exist as...
Let me clear up
Yeah.
this urban myth about the Clydeside Archways here, right? So, about 5 years ago, when I was speaking to DRS and Network Rail about that project, it's sort of been thinking that idea since probably 15 years down here, that it'd be great to get them done. There wasn't any graffiti on them. It was very light. It'd be a tag. And then in the creation of the graffiti removal team, they started to buff it and buff it regular. So there was nothing ever substantial on it. It'd be a quick dab and things like that, and it'd be buffed.
Yep.
So I actually spoke to the guys. I was speaking to the graffiti guys and found out I'd done my research on it and looked into that, and basically told DRS and Network Rail, how much money's flying about here for these guys buffing this if that's your answer? There's
Yeah.
money changing hands here,
yeah.
you know, in corporate companies. And I went, tell you what, see to actually find out the extent of the graffiti problem we've actually got, don't buff it. And then we'll see overnight
Right.
how much that increases, because you know, if graffiti is allowed to stay, others will feel free to add to it,
Right.
right? So I done
Just
that,
let it
and
exist.
it worked, and let it exist. But it ended up in existing in a way that is really undesirable to 90% of the public. Whereas graffiti writers went, within about 3 years, they says, it's your spot. I mean, I don't know who gave them it. I think it was me that gave them it, because I told them to stop painting it, with the view of actually doing a project.
Right.
And it just occurred that it happened, unfortunate events happened, that I did dedicate it to somebody, you know, and I put a wee plaque up and things like that. That's by the by. But the retaliation off the back of that, how dare you paint our stuff, how dare you? Yeah, a minute, this was almost like a master plan of mine, in order to get that, to show the city, no, you do have a graffiti problem, and this is how it can be resolved, without you going up and buffing that, and you charging them money, and them going, how much are you charging us? And you know,
Yeah.
and through that, and allowing graffiti writers, you know, Tayo, Talks, etc., you know, allowing these guys to actually do their work on it and do their best work on there, you know. You've just created a big Hall of Fame, and it's to everybody sitting, okay, there's a couple of guys going, it's our walls, and this wall was meant for such and things like that. And it's like, come on guys, it's progress. It's progress, it's getting our scene. Think where you are at 18, think where I am at 50. I'm making a living here, but I'm still using that spray paint. I'm still supporting the scene. I'm still pumping that money into our scene.
Yep.
That's what goes around comes around. If there's no big things like this happening with 356 colours on the racks, without these guys doing this, you'll have 10 colours on the racks.
Yeah. Yardworks this year has been cancelled.
Aye.
It was supposed to happen back in May. So, you know, if all things had been going normal, we would have been coming off the back end of what would have been like the fourth year of the festival. And I think the 2020, it would have been probably the biggest. It was getting bigger every year, so it would have been the biggest and best one. I just assume, wishful thinking. But again, it's sad because the exact people that you're trying to engage with have unfortunately missed out this year on an opportunity to be engaged with, and an opportunity to have a space where they can come and they can just take their time and paint what they want to paint.
That's the thing a lot of people don't realise, is that background thing that what Yardworks does. It might only be that weekend. I mean, I got asked at the start of Yardworks there, what do you miss? And the thing I missed the most was all the workers, all the people, the setup, the buzz before it, and then the smile on the faces of some of the guys after it. I'm talking the writers, you know, street arts, whatever you want to call them, the writers I call them, you know, every one of them. And you'll know this as well, the amount of work people get off the back of it.
Oh yeah.
There's actually a whole employability. It's feasible to say that about Yardworks, that the amount of guys that pass across a business card to that guy, I love your work, mate. Yeah, it's huge. Is huge. And you know, I'm not asking for anything in return. I just need that to create a stronger scene, and a stronger scene helps everybody, and it helps what I love sort of tick better as well, Ciaran, you know. It's a strange one, it's a funny one. I never actually thought about it like that at the start before I done it. I just wanted to go hundreds of graph writers and see hundreds of graffiti, you know, and then all the street art stuff and everything. I'm like, right, street art, it's a media name for it, you know. It's still art at the end of the day, and that's why I work in a place like this. I've got typography here, graphic design here, illustrator there, and graffiti writer there. And
what does Yardworks 2021 look like?
Awesome, mate, you know.
I love it.
You know, you're always faced with the first hurdle, and that's getting the sponsorship, and that's just difficult, you know. We've got amazing support for Global Art Supply. Everybody will know them as Montana Cans UK. Kevin Murphy there and Jay, absolute legends. Right before lockdown, I was down there visiting them, sitting on top of all the spray paint, you know, swimming about.
I think we've seen that picture.
Yeah, you know, the thoughts of Yardworks, you know, but they guys are instrumental. We need that support, and the whole scene needs that support. And I mean the whole scene here, the whole UK scene needs that support. You go to, again, Winwood in Miami, you go to Antwerp, you go to Marseille, any one of these big European cities. The amount of funding that's thrown at these things by telecom companies and lawyers, you name it, architect companies.
But is that when it loses its edge though? Because like you can still keep your edge if you're still funded.
Do you know what? We need money. We need money. We need money to fund it, because I'm not getting that for any other angle. You know, SWG3 obviously are instrumental in that, but then it's up to me to actually bring in the rest of that and develop that. Hence me even taking on Marianne Vossel, who is, you know, knows more about street art than anybody I know.
Shout outs to Marianne.
Yeah, Maz. She's brilliant. She's brilliant.
But I mean, how does Yardworks 2021 look? Do you sit at night and think, what if we're not back to normality by 2021? How does it look? Do you focus more on less international travel? Do you focus on much smaller, more, dare I say, exclusive amount of people involved in it? Like physically, how does it look if someone walks through that gate as a punter? How does Yardworks 2021 look?
It still looks awesome, and that's through that curation of it. You know, there we were faced with the whole lockdown and coming out of the lockdown and the situation changed where we were allowed a group of 8 people. As soon as that was allowed, I had guys itching to paint, and we got the both productions done. We'd done 2 different productions in the yard. It looks epic. It's all locals. It's all locals. We don't need big internationals. We've already got that name, but it's still good. The reason these internationals are here in the first place is to inspire that wee guy for Partick, that boy for Paisley, to see how he does it, to get a legend like Inky up, to get Voider and P. Shavel painting the gable end inside the galvanisers hall, with classical art and classical graffiti combined. It's only going to inspire these guys. If they hate it, then they're maybe in the wrong game. If they hate that, this is me going back to this whole fight between graffiti and street art and how they work together and things like that. I feel, why do you hate that so much when it is really down the same street as you? There might be an opposite pavements here, but you're still going for the same objectives, the two of you. Why are you writing out of top of street art or whatever? Why are you buffing that when the Home Office are doing 5 o'clock in the morning rage to asylum seekers and things like that? There's media companies telling us lies and things like that. There's advertising everywhere and stuff like that in our faces. Why are we attacking each other? Had to get that in there. Sorry.
No, but is that not sometimes quite the point? End up divide and conquer with certain aspects of people,
so, I suppose so, but
rather us fighting each other.
But at the same time, it's supposed to have been progress and really helping these young guys by bringing in these artists. I mean, look at Ciaran. Would you call him a street artist? The fact that he's not writing letters, the guy's absolutely a whiz kid. With a spray can, the detail he's pulling out without a stencil cap and things like that. Is it graffiti? Is it sculpture? Is it abstract?
Sure.
These boys should be picking up on these skills for these guys. Look what he's doing with a mini roller.
So would the focus on 2021 Yardworks be more local then? Because even if seeing New Year's Day 2021 they find a vaccine and this is all cured and we never have to deal with coronavirus ever again, I think that there should be lessons learned about our the ease at which we have fallen into this idea that we can just jump on a plane for £100 and be the other side of the planet in like 7 hours time. It's just, maybe it was too quick, and I think after the pandemic it's time to refocus a wee bit more on like who surrounds you. And so it would be, of course, international talent needs to be shown in Glasgow, but I think that like it's a great opportunity to focus in on something else a bit more local, and I think the good thing that was with Yardworks in the past is that you had like workshops in which I was involved in one of them in one of the first or second years. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Just very quick, very subtle, nothing, no great airs and graces, just a sign painting workshop, and like having that was really good. Having the graffiti side of the city be involved and not feel excluded is like important, but it has to also be policed in some way. Excuse the word policed, but you know what I mean.
The graffiti boys are coming and things like that, and you're saying local. Right away as soon as we say that, maybe some of the people listening will think, right, it's all going to end up then just heavy graffiti, because it is a very heavy graffiti city. Even the street artists that are up in the so-called street artists that are up in the city, I've all got a graffiti background, the majority of them, Smug and Rogue, James Klingatron is probably, he's the only one that just marry a contemporary style on the stencils and stuff. That's the only connotation there.
Or like more contemporary.
Or art school trained, really professional in what they do. So there is a
Conjure Globel, no formal training.
The gruesome twosome.
No formal training needed.
No formal training needed. I think it's probably one of the best ways as well. Same with Smugs, same with Bob as well.
What if you start like a graffiti school or a street art graffiti school in Yardworks?
We are trying to build a purpose-built graffiti studio.
Right.
When we acquired we've got land at the back, SWG3, it's just derelict land, it's in between two railway tracks, sort of dead wood. We acquired that through basically having to get a better fire exit and things like that for the clubs, the venues and things like that. So it was a rite of passage, and we share that rite of passage with Network Rail at the back, but there is surprisingly a hell of a lot of land at the sides, and we're trying to get a purpose-built graffiti studio in there
and how would that look?
Bring in local kids. Well, it would help, like, so you get, you know, I don't know if you remember the Central Station job where we done like 400 foot of Central Station, the big, big long thing, and I had to put it round a perimeter down the stairway, tracker, you know, track bags.
It was in the back.
But we had to change that 4 times. You can imagine a system I've come up with, and it's with clips and ball bearings, and it's like your blinds if you just shove the boards in. And you could actually slide them along, and if you were using projectors or whatever, you leave a projector in one place, you just keep sliding your boards along. There'd be sinks in there, there'd be cutting boards in there, there'd be computers in there. You know, we were looking into maybe getting laser cutters, this, that, everything. You could have this hub, and you could really take one young guy that was really into it and take him right the way through to the point he was doing his commercial work there. You know, making a good living and giving us a return to that as well, you know.
I find that interesting because that's almost like an apprenticeship scheme for like a new...
It's an employability programme.
I mean, there is a new job in the world, and it's called being a street artist or a commercial artist. It's a new job. This is the point in the interview where I ask you guys if you get any shout-outs, if you get anything to shout out to the people out there. Well, because you've built up probably years and years of shout-outs though, and you need to kind of condense them into like...
I know, I've really never done it ever.
Sam never shouted out anyone in the last podcast. No. I had to shout out his own fucking town for him.
I've never liked him. You know, shout-outs to my wife.
Your dinner's getting cooked tonight.
You know, what my brother and my mother, who are my creative inspirations and stuff, you know. These people, Marianne, again, you know. Again, you know, Montana. We've said all these people through it, really, you know. That have been their parties, you know. Even, you know, Big J with the videos and stuff like that, you know. There's so many good people out there that have really helped the cause here, and you know, Muttley, God, you know, Muttley's been instrumental all the way in this, you know, and he's that guy in the background behind me that's pushed me out so many times, you know. And if anything, I'd like to shout out to the Glasgow graffiti writers, the West of Scotland graffiti writers, and get that unity together and make us strong, mate. Make us a really strong scene, and that's what I've done Yardworks for. Because you know, I'll still sit there the same as you. Come up for 52, mate, and I'm still sitting there drawing wild styles on my fancy iPad now, my head. But I do feel, if anything, I wanted to shout about is that unity. And where is all this beef coming from? Where is all this? Why is it like that? It doesn't need to be like that. We can all get on way better. You know, come and chat my door, take a wall, take a board, take a... You know, it needs to be like that, man. We're too small a city for that, you know. And it's a shame that it's gone like that.
Well, you heard it here. What did we come out of this with? Unity, bringing shit together, literal chapping on guys' door, whether it's literal or an email, touching base, talking, fucking just... The city's too small to be bickering for nothing. Nothing's mutually exclusive. Everything can be resolved, brought together. I think the overriding theme of this podcast has been that.
It's a character,
unity. And I think with that, I'm going to thank Gaz, first of all, because he's here. And I'm going to thank you, the viewer, for giving us the time. Gaz, thanks for your time. Viewer, thanks for your time listening to this. I hope that it's been informative and enjoyable and entertaining. And it leaves nothing but an elbow bump, I think. Because we're still in the midst of a pandemic. even though we've been sitting here less than a metre apart for a couple of hours.
It's your meat's a problem, mate.
Alright guys, thanks for watching and listening. Love you. You're fucking gate crashing it now.